Have you ever wondered what people ate when there was nothing left to eat? In medieval Europe, famine wasn't just hunger. It was fear. A cold, slow terror that decided who lived and who didn't. Villagers had a secret ranking of famine foods. The first tier was rough but survivable. The third, so horrifying that many preferred death. Yet somehow, those who dared to eat the unthinkable often survived. Every morning, farmers rose to play the deadliest game on earth, survival by weather. No forecasts. No control. Just sky, soil, and hope. One day the sun painted the wheat fields gold. The next, storms drowned them in black water. Rain didn't know when to stop, like an unwanted guest who refused to leave. Seeds rotted, grain soured, and the smell of decay replaced the smell of bread. But the droughts were even crueler. Imagine watching every stalk you planted curl into dust under a merciless sun. Prayers rose into cloudless skies that never answered. It was nature's way of reminding them, you don't control anything here. And just when hope returned with spring warmth, a sudden frost would strike, freezing the young shoots in one brutal night. A cosmic joke played on those who had nothing left to laugh about. The panic that followed wasn't about missing a few meals. It was the realization that winter was coming, with no food in the granaries and no promise of another harvest. Villages that once smelled of baking bread now echoed with empty silence. We complain about supermarket shortages, these people faced extinction. And the terrifying truth? Failed harvests weren't rare. They happened every few years, as predictable as heartbreak. Farmers rolled the dice each season, hoping for mercy from the sky. Sometimes they won. Most times, the house, nature, won instead. These weren't lazy or foolish people. They were trapped inside a system that demanded everything and gave nothing back. No forecasts, no safety nets. Only grit, community, and blind faith. When the fields turned barren and the grain bins stood empty, desperation didn't wait. It pushed them to innovate. To dig, to hunt, to forage, to invent food where none existed. That's when you start to see the real brilliance of medieval survival. Because when people have nothing left, that's when they become truly creative. A single failed harvest could trigger an avalanche that buried entire communities. Not just hunger, chaos. Malnutrition made bodies weak, sickness spread like wildfire, and entire regions collapsed. Even the Black Death struck hardest where famine had already softened resistance. Coincidence? Not a chance. But hunger wasn't the only monster. Crime rose with every empty stomach. Bread prices doubled, then tripled. Imagine paying everything you own for a loaf so hard it could break your teeth. The rich hoarded grain like dragons with gold, while the poor sold family heirlooms just to buy moldy barley. A cruel joke of fate, the harder life became, the more the price of staying alive increased. Lords found themselves cornered, between starving peasants and empty granaries. Some opened their private stores. Others faced mobs with pitchforks. Social order cracked like old bread crust. Weddings were cancelled. Dowries vanished. Young people fled to cities, leaving ghost villages behind. And yet, in that chaos, something beautiful happened. People began helping one another. Neighbor helped neighbor. Strangers became family. Those who had nothing still gave something. Even the church recorded a miracle, donations increased during famine years. It's as if hunger stripped away everything false and left only humanity behind. Communities remembered who stood with them. The generous. The cowards. The silent. Those memories lasted for decades, shaping who people trusted long after the hunger ended. But the real miracle wasn't charity. It was what they discovered next, food hidden in plain sight. Because when all the wheat and barley failed, medieval people turned to the forest. Mother Nature had her own grocery store, open all year, no lines, no coins. Berries, nuts, roots, wild greens, every leaf and mushroom became a question of life or death. They knew the land better than we know our phones. One wrong mushroom and you died by morning. One right root and your family survived another week. Foraging wasn't luck. It was ancestral science. Families went together, grandmothers teaching which roots to dig, children spotting berries, men fishing rivers that never stopped giving. When the land failed, the forest became salvation. Even the forest couldn't feed everyone forever. Winter arrived like a silent thief, stealing what little hope remained. When berries disappeared and rivers froze, the real desperation began. But instead of surrendering, medieval people did something remarkable. They reinvented food itself. The first rule of famine cooking was simple: nothing goes to waste. That rock-hard bread you'd normally throw away. In the Middle Ages, it became gold. They soaked it, boiled it, mixed it with scraps of bacon fat, tired vegetables, or bones already gnawed clean. What came out of the pot wasn't pretty, but it kept people alive. They called it pottage, the thick, murky stew that could turn crumbs into a meal. A single piece of bread could feed a family if you knew how to stretch it. Every spoonful was a miracle of ingenuity. One day it might taste of barley and herbs, the next of cheese rind and fish bones. There was no recipe, only survival. Mothers became artists of disguise, making the same ingredients seem new every night. To waste food was to waste life itself. But soon, even the crumbs ran out. And that's when people began to experiment with substitute breads. When there was no wheat, they ground chestnuts. When chestnuts vanished, they crushed peas. When peas failed, they turned to acorns, yes, actual acorns. And when all else was gone, they ate the forest itself. Pine bark, stripped, dried, ground, mixed with the last handful of flour. The result tasted like soil and sorrow, but it was still food. It sounds tragic now, but in those moments, it was pure brilliance. They learned to leach bitterness from acorns by soaking them for days, to grind bark fine enough to chew, to blend roots and herbs for strength. Each region invented its own survival bread. In the south, people used seaweed and salt. In the mountains, pine needles added a faint aroma of life. The texture was wrong, the color strange, but when your stomach ached from emptiness, taste no longer mattered. Still, out of those experiments came something unexpected: new traditions. Some of those desperate recipes evolved into dishes we still know today. And then came the true secret weapon: cheese. In a world without refrigerators, cheese was edible time travel. A wheel made in summer could last until spring. It was the medieval savings account, rich, dense, precious. While peasants chewed on bark bread, a sliver of cheese gave strength, fat, and warmth. It wasn't luxury, it was survival disguised as flavor. The same went for fermentation. Sauerkraut, pickled vegetables, fermented milk, these weren't delicacies. They were science before science existed. Without knowing why, they discovered bacteria could save them. Cabbage left in brine stayed fresh for months. Spoiled milk turned into cheese that grew more delicious with time. They didn't need to understand microbiology, they just needed to live another winter. Monasteries became the guardians of this knowledge. Their cellars were filled with wheels of cheese and barrels of preserved vegetables. When famine hit, monks didn't preach, they shared. They fed entire villages from their stores, turning faith into sustenance. It was humanity at its best, sung in quiet prayers over bowls of soup. Different regions specialized in different miracles. Northern lands fermented fish and dairy, southern lands preserved fruits and vegetables. Every place found its own way to cheat death. And through these humble jars and barrels, communities survived the unthinkable. But the most powerful invention of all wasn't food, it was togetherness. When one family's granary went empty, the entire village gathered. Everyone brought something, even if it was almost nothing. A few barley grains, a slice of old cheese, a handful of mushrooms. They threw it all into one great pot, stirring hope into hunger. It wasn't a feast, it was communion. One pot. One fire. One chance to survive the night. The act of sharing turned despair into strength. People who ate together stayed alive together. In those dark winters, survival wasn't just about calories, it was about courage. Because when you sit beside your neighbors, holding a wooden bowl and realizing you're not alone, that's when humanity truly shines. Historians say the Middle Ages were dark times. But maybe they were just raw, honest times. Because from that darkness came traditions, recipes, and lessons that still whisper today. Resilience, generosity, unity. So next time you break a loaf of bread, remember, it once meant survival. And if they could endure those winters, what could we survive, if we stood together the same way? If stories like this remind you of the strength hidden in ordinary people, stay with us. Subscribe, and let history keep teaching us how to endure, one forgotten tale at a time.